To our latest presentation in the Stilo DITA Knowledge Series. I'm Les Burnham, CEO of Stilo, and I'll be acting as moderator during today's presentation. Given again by Jackie Samuels of Writing Wise, with logistical support being provided in the background by Helen Owens, our marketing manager. For the benefit of new attendees, I'll just go through the usual housekeeping sessions. Many of you will have seen this before. But just to mention again that everyone will be muted for the duration of the webinar. But please submit any questions as they might occur to you in the chat window and address them to Helen Owens if you could, please. And we'll address them all at the end of the session. Similarly, at the end of today's session, we'll be running a poll, and we'll be looking to gather feedback on today's presentation, which we very much value and appreciate. And would look forward to things if you could really just spend a couple of minutes at the end completing that. To mention as well, today's webinar has been recorded, and we'll be sending a link afterwards to all attendees. So just to move on, give you a brief introduction to Stilo, if I can. Very quickly, you'll probably be aware that we specialize in the automating conversion of content to XML format. We do work pretty exclusively actually in DITA. We do some other formats, but most folks in DITA right now coming from Frame, InDesign, Word, Rubber Help files, XML, SGML as well, to DITA. And now you'll see sort of a selection of our customers, which range from large organizations to smaller ones, some converting tens of thousands of pages, others converting 2 or 3 books. So really quite a range of customers that we service. So, without further ado, really, I want to be handing over to Jackie now to introduce herself and talk on the subject of identifying reuse potential, which I believe is something really close to everyone's hearts. Everyone who's actually implementing DITA should be, I think, giving serious consideration to this right at the outset. And so I hope that you find today's presentation useful and helpful, informative. And over to you, Jackie, to introduce yourself and to move on to today's presentation.
Great. Thanks, Les. Can you hear okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Les, for having me again for this this webinar and this beautiful June day in Ottawa. It's just fantastic. I have to admit that after this webinar, I'm going to turn off my computer and go enjoy the summer day. And I hope all of you get a chance to do that as well soon if you have nice weather like we're having here. Just myself a little bit. I run a tiny little company called Writing Wise. I work with DITA content, a content strategist, a senior information developer, a CMS consultant, pretty much anything else somebody needs from me. I've worked with DITA for the last, it's got to be 8 years now. First as a technical writer, and then as a consultant and a CMS consultant, and then an information architect. And I pretty much do it all now, which is very interesting. I work in close partnership with Publishing Smarter, who most of you probably heard of me through. I work through Publishing Smarter very frequently. My background is in English literature, and I got my tech writing certificate from Seneca College in Toronto. I have a background in content management and information management. I'm AIM certified in SharePoint, which has been the bit of my existence for like the last 2 months. So SharePoint. I also frequently author articles on TechWorld and sometimes on Intercom as well. If you want to connect up with me, the best place is probably LinkedIn, but I also occasionally tweet, and I'm on Google+. So feel free to connect with me on any of those. Enough about me. Let's get on to reuse potential. So reuse. This is, I think, officially the second easiest way to see return on investment on your DITA implementation. The first easiest way being through translation. Fortunately, reuse is also the sort of effort that we put. We don't really put enough effort into in the beginning, so we don't see the returns that we could see from it. And it's sort of one of those places where I'd like people to put a little more effort into, and they'd see a faster ROI on their content, on their DITA implementations. So I'm really going to talk too much about why you want to reuse. We've got some goals here. We're going to author faster. You're going to update content faster. You're going to have consistent content across your documentation sets. You're going to have translation savings simply by reusing content that needs to be translated. You're translating it once, so you're going to have translation savings. And you've got this sort of single source of truth, which is a quote from Bernard Ashwaubenon, where you've got this one spot where you know it's correct, and you just pull it in everywhere you need it. So you always have sort of this confidence in your content. So if you're watching a webinar, you probably already understand these benefits, and they've been sort of drilled into your brain, but maybe you don't know how to sort of implement them. So that's what I'm going to cover today. We're going to cover the what and the how of reuse. But first, we're actually going to talk about metrics, because if you can't do it, then however you want to finish that sentence, your executives aren't going to be happy with you. You don't know if you've succeeded. You really need to be able to measure it. So there are a number of ways to measure reuse. One of them is topic-level reuse, but I find that ignores a lot of inline reuse that can actually be quite extensive. So on this past project I've been working on, where we had significant amount of reuse, I found the following equation from Bill Hackos at CIDM to be the most useful for me. So it's the one I like at this point, but I think it's an area that needs more development. So let me just walk through his metric, which is reuse is counting all the words in your produced content, so your PDFs, your HTML, your mobile, all of those words, then subtract the words in your repository, so your XML files but without the tags and the attribute values and all the metadata. And the whole thing by that same number of words in the repository. And that gives you an example of a project I was working on where we had 57,000 words in our output, but only 30,000 words in our XML source, and that gave us a reuse percentage of 91%, which is pretty awesome. And it actually went way up past 100% once we added mobile to the output. So there are other tools out there, though. You don't have to stick with that equation. And actually, you might be asking me, well, how do I get the number of words in my content? And I actually came across this cool little tool called Count Anything. And it can count the number of words in your PDFs. It can count the number of words in your Word files. Not that you need help, but the number of words in your XML files, not including your tags, which is the important part. You need to count the content, not the tags. And pretty much any other format you can sort of throw at it, it can handle. It's a resource slide at the end of this presentation that gives you the URL for the tool, but it's called Count Anything. And if your content is stuck in a CCMS, then you need to put it into a file directory somewhere. Just download the whole repository somewhere, or if you have a backup of it, and then run it through there. But it's definitely possible to get these word counts fairly easily. And I think it gives you a very accurate percentage of reuse. So your next question is probably something around what's the average amount of reuse I can expect out of my content, and it really does depend on the type of content that you've got. And so there's a clear in sometimes. Anne Rockley says in her Data 101 book that the average amount of reuse is somewhere between 25% and 80%. An average, that is a huge span of percentage. It's just kind of crazy that that's the average, but it's because something like a user guide can get easily somewhere between 40% and 60% reuse with, say, the reference guide or this and that. But when you get into something like standards content, where you're writing internal procedural workflows, that sort of thing, then you can get way up over 100% reuse. And that's what I've been working on for the past 6 months, and it has totally been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. And we get the extreme sort of numbers where you see 254% was on that project. That's the amount of reuse we had. Jeff Engel just had a webinar about his reuse, which was somewhere up around 588%. I think that's the number he came up with. I didn't look at his metrics or anything, but I trust him because I've worked with him before, and it does get way up over 100%. You don't think that 100% is your limit because you can reuse a topic or a fragment many, many times in many, many outputs, and can lift your reuse percentage right up way past 100%. Which is a lot of fun to make pretty charts and graphs for executives because you know they're going to want to see them. An important step to communicate your metrics, even like sort of the beginning where your metrics aren't so good, halfway through your implementation where your metrics are getting better, and then when you've deemed yourself done, air quotes around the word done, so they can see your progression and they can feel better about the money they put into your project, basically. You'll probably have questions around the metrics. That's fine. We'll answer them at the end. And I'm going to move past the metrics at this point. It is an important step, though. So we're going to talk about these types of reuse strategies today. And we'll go sort of through each one. So don't worry too much if you see a term and I don't define it completely at that moment. We'll get to it. Thing about figuring out what content you can reuse is that you don't know that it's sort of reusable content until you know what's possible in DITA 1.2. You need to know the mechanisms behind the reuse before you can look at a piece of content and this piece of content over there and say, oh, you know what? I could totally reuse that because I can use keys, for example. Yeah, they're different, but I can reuse them. So I'm going to sort of look at this webinar through the eyes of what sort of content you want to look at, but it's also going to be mechanisms you can use in the background to help you out. So your next question is probably going to be, are there use tools out there? Can you automatically identify for me what content is the same or similar so that I'll know like right away without having to look at it what content I can reuse? There is a qualified yes. Some CCMSs have the ability to run machine algorithms. Particular Visant, one of my favorite CCMSs, but let's not go there, has this really cool prompt. If you're authoring and your prompt, your content is almost exactly the same as something that's already stored in the CCMS. You go to load and check it back in. It'll say, hey, you have this content that's 92% matching. Do you want to reuse it instead? And that prompt is great, and I think it's an important feature of a CCMS, but it doesn't replace a reuse strategy, which I will sort of harp on today. You can also do the same thing. You can create your own script that runs through the content and finds matching, it matches as 90% or more, you should reuse it. And that can be useful, but in the end, the best tool is actually going to be your brain, because you're going to start to realize as you walk through and learn these mechanisms, you start to realize that there's potential for reuse pretty much everywhere, all over the place. And a matching algorithm on words isn't going to find it all. It'll find the content that's similar, but it's not going to find the content that's variable or the content that ought to be similar but isn't. That content that it's in two places and it should say the same thing and it really doesn't. It's not going to find that. Also, it's not going to find places where you want it to be different in two places, but you actually want to control it in the same place. So you want to be able to reuse it, but have variations on it. And we're going to talk about that today. So your strategy is going to be the key that gets you through a good reuse implementation. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Use your brain. Okay, so what to look for. Content changes. It's variable or it's volatile. Variable meaning it changes periodically, so you want to update all your sample code with the current year, for example. Each time the year changes, or you want to update a customer, client name, or even sort of realize the user names that you use in your code, like that. It changes periodically or it changes when it's in different contexts. Volatile meaning it changes at somebody else's whim. And the development team who changes all the option names 10 days before the product release. That's the sort of volatile thing I'm thinking about. I'm also going to look for content that doesn't change. This is the sort of thing that we tend to think about good candidates for reuse. Off that, this is standardized content. It needs to be standardized. Warnings or federal requirements or regulatory information. It needs to be the same in every spot. Or it's universal and it applies to an entire documentation set, like a terminology or the state of things, or the status lists of things, stuff like that, the content that you don't want to change in different contexts. And then third one that you're going to look for, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but just stick with me for a second. Content both changes and stays the same. So underneath it all, it's the same information, but the details might change depending on who's accessing it, how they're accessing it, what combinations of products or features they have enabled or installed. So this is the sort of thing where if you get your products the users start to be able to mix and match their products, so they have suites of products and they might swap out this one for that one. Your content is both changing because it's different for each person, but it's staying the same. So you're swapping in and out pieces of content. And we'll go into that in detail in a little bit. Okay, let's move on to variables. Variables are very much like the FrameMaker variables that most of you are probably familiar with. It's the content that's going to frequently, periodically change. So the year, the name of the document that you're working on, or the name of the documents that you're referring to, the component names, let's see. It's where when you want to change it, you want it to change everywhere. And stuff that would ordinarily have been a variable in FrameMaker now becomes a variable in DITA, and it's done that using a key, which I will get to in a second. Also looking for content that changes based on context. So this could be the product name changes based on where that topic is in the information set, or where the user is accessing it from. If you use one topic in two places, but it's slightly different in each place, you can use a key to to manage the variations. It's also content that changes only in your document. So if you're using a topic across an entire documentation set, but in your document you want a particular word to be replaced, that's the sort of thing that you can do with a variable. And use a key for that. The key is one of the mechanisms that's very, very useful. It came out in DITA 1.1, so we should all be familiar with it, but I think a lot of people have not started using them, and I'm not sure why. They're really handy little features, and they're much more robust than the FrameMaker variables. You're only defining them once in each high-level deliverable map, so this is your book map that you're building. You do it in that map, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And you can actually group all your keys together if you end up having a lot of them, which you might if you have a lot of reuse. You just group them all together in one map, and that map can then be moved around and referenced in all your book maps. It's a really handy way of organizing and managing your keys. So let's do an example of keys. I've got a P element, my paragraph, and it's just a sentence. And the keys are very good for sort of inline variables. And instead of hard-coding a word in there or using a condition or anything like that, I've just stuck in a keyref. My keyref is called numbers, and my key is called numbers, and I'm referring to it. My keyref is the numbers in line there. On the left side, under number 2, I've got my first map, where I'm defining my key. And I want that key to be resolved as the word Arabic in that sentence. So you'll see the arrow down. In that sentence, it now comes out as Arabic when I publish through that map. When I publish through a map that's under number 3, I want it to come out as Roman. So I've got one element, and this could be whatever, it could be an entire topic that you're using this in. You can use the keys anywhere. That goes two different ways. And my potential for reuse is huge, but also to provide that is specific to each position, each context that it needs to be published in. It's a really easy way of just swapping out one word for another. Particularly useful for product names, and component names. So you would never think of having sort of dozens of FrameMaker variables, or I hope not. But keys, much, much easier to have dozens of them without any problem. Your management of them is all done in the map. You just define them all in your map, you list them all, and they're very easy to update, to keep track of, and everything. It's a lot easier than FrameMaker variables. Do not be afraid of keys. Keys are your friend. Let's move on to volatile things. Volatile things are content that changes at somebody else's whim, like I said before. So development changes all of the interface names or all the options, 10 days before release. You want to be able to be agile enough to quickly update that. And if you use conrefs, you probably can update it faster than they can. It's the sort of information where you want to change it everywhere it's used, not in just select places, because when you change the source, you'll change it everywhere. Using conrefs or conkeyrefs, just keep that in the back of your mind. It could be conkeyrefs, and we're going to come back specifically to conkeyrefs later. We're going to concentrate on conrefs for now. So conrefs are best done using warehouse topics. Warehouse topics are also called snippet files. Many of you probably know snippets. I think the term that we're trying to use now is warehouse topics. We also talk that, or many topics, that you never intend to publish, although I have been in the situation very recently where our warehouse topics actually became entire deliverables, so there's usefulness on a couple of levels there. But warehouse topics, you store all your reusable snippets, basically. To pull from that warehouse topic into your regular task, concept, reference, everything you need that piece of content. So then you just date it in one place in your warehouse topic, and you're good to go. Your ability to update these volatile things becomes, it's a matter of minutes instead of hours or days. So another advantage of using warehouse topics, all this information is in one spot, so all of your UI items would be in one file. All of your options would be in another file or commands. You can sort of centralize by subject matter or whatever makes sense for your authoring. And the authors know that when they go and change one of these warehouse topics, they're changing it for everybody with conref from them. It's a major hurdle for a lot of people where they don't know that they're changing something that somebody else has conrefed in. So all of a sudden another author publishes, their content has magically changed because somebody else changed their own topic that other author had conref from. So it is a major hurdle, and the way to get around that, other than using a really good CCMS, is to use warehouse topics. So it's good on a number of levels. Let's take a look at a warehouse topic now. You know what I'm talking about. This is my warehouse topic for menu names. So I've got them all stuck in UI control elements. Each element has an ID so that I can conref it in. It must have an ID to be conrefable. And all I do is list them. I can organize them however I want. I've got this in a generic topic type. It doesn't have to be a task, a concept, or reference. I can just use generic topics. It's very useful. And I can put in them inside whatever element I need. I can organize them into tables or lists or whatever I need to conref in. I certainly find conrefing works very well the phrase level when you need to conref into another element, like title, which only takes phrase elements. And I conref a lot of paragraphs, the occasional table, a lot of list items. There are things that you'll find that you conref over and over, so you just create this warehouse with the structure that you need to conref in from, or as I should say. So here's an example of me conrefing it in. This is my task with a step where I select File Restart as one of my steps. And I've just conrefed in File and then Restart into a menu cascade. I've got the menu cascade in my task topic, but I could also set up my warehouse topic to actually have the menu cascade in it. It all depends on what makes the most sense. If you want to have all of the options of file exit, file restart in your warehouse topic, you can do that. Down below, it's just a code view of the same sentence up above. So you can see that it's just you control with a conref attribute and attribute value each time, and it's just wrapped in a menu cascade. So every time you want to, every time they go and randomly change the menu names on you, all you do is go into your warehouse topic, update, and then republish. And when you republish, you just have all the new menu items, voila, like fast. I said this isn't. I mean, my example here is much like FrameMaker variables, but you never think of making your menu items FrameMaker variables because there are just too many of them. But it's totally possible by conrefing to have thousands of these items, commands, options that just control centrally from one place and conref in everywhere. The trick is you have to teach your authors or yourself to make sure that every time they mention a menu name that they're conrefing it in, so that when it changes everywhere. If somebody has not conrefed in a particular spot, then it's not going to get updated, and you're going to have to do it manually. Or yet find those aberrances and fix them, make them conrefs instead. So there is a bit of a gotcha. You have to be authoring the right way. Let's get into standardized content. I just need to check the time, make sure we're good. A little long. Okay, I'll try to move a little faster through this. Standardized content. This is the information that we know needs to be reused. It's a whole topic on legal information. It's your regulatory information that has to be the same in each spot. It's your standards that must be worded exactly the same way each time. And it's the sort of information that we're used to reusing. So you can use conrefs for this. You can use topic level reuse and map level reuse. And don't forget that you can use graphs and topics and maps with keys. So if legal information has to be slightly different in each book map, then don't copy and paste your topic and have variations on it, even if your CCMS manages those variations for you. Use keys and swap out the words that you need. Just hold it in your map instead, and your reuse will go right up. It'll go up. So that's the goal: get the reuse high. I'm not going to go through examples of standardized content because I think you all know what I'm talking about. And we're a little short on time, so we'll just go right on to glossary terms, which are one of my favorites. Glossary terms are glossary topics, so the DITA gloss topic, using keys. So we're using both of those together. And I'm talking about not managing a sort of a web morass of incredibly numerous glossary maps. I'm talking about maintaining all your glossary topics in one map, and you pull it into every single book map that you've got. Because you can do some really cool things, like having them there all the time. It does add a tiny bit of bloat to your doc set, but I think it's worth it because you can do some really cool things with glossaries. If that's the sort of terminology-based output that you need for your users, then you could do things like generate custom glossaries at the end of each PDF automatically without having to do anything other than refer to the key in line. You need to think the DITA Open Toolkit a little bit, but it's very, very doable. You can pull in a glossary definition as a tooltip or a pop-up in your HTML. You can swap out user and context-specific words. So this term is slightly different over here. You can just swap it out really easily. You can do things like create an automatically generated list or table of acronyms and their related terms. And then actually link from the related terms or the acronyms right down into the glossary so they can just click and go to the whole definition. There are a lot of things you can do with glossaries, and I think they're really underused at this point. I have a great reference on the resources slide on where you can find out more about what you can do with glossaries. Just let me show you some code, because that's the fun part. So up right-hand corner, I've got my glossary topic. I'm using a definition list inside, a concept or something like that. I'm talking about glossary topics. I'm showing just a very basic one here with a minimum number of tags, but there's actually quite a few tags that are available to you, including abbreviations, acronyms, synonyms, all sorts of things, which means once you've set them all up, you can leverage the heck out of them. And there's a lot you can do, especially with you get into synonyms. You can swap out based on synonyms. Pretty cool. So glossary topic at the top. Graphic in the middle, the context element. That's my inline reference to something that needs to have a glossary term associated with it. So in HTML it would become, I'd have a pop-up definition over the word universe. In my PDF, I might have the custom glossary at the end so the universe entry and definition get pulled into the end into a glossary appendix. So all I do in line is wrap an element around it, and it could be any element. I have an xref here, but it could be as a term element. We found the xref worked a little better for pop-ups in HTML. That's why we used it. But all I have to do in my element is have the attribute keyref and the value that matches the value that's down below in my map. So if you look on the right-hand side of the topic ref, the keys equals universe, and that's what connects the glossary term with the inline sort of where you want that glossary term to be connected. That's what connects the two together. Make sure the keys are the same. It's very easy to do. It's easy to author. The hardest part is making sure that you have the keys that match. So if you have universes instead of universe, then you're in trouble. It's not going to match, and it's not going to come out. But that's pretty much the hardest thing about it, and there are tools to help you out with that. You'll also maybe notice that my term in my glossary topic is capitalized, but I don't want a capitalized universe to be in line in my sentence. So I just override it by typing in the word universe inside my xref element, and that's the one that's black rather than red, and that overrides the term that comes out. So this could be something like, I want universe with, I don't know, the acronym inside syntheses afterwards or something like that. You're not stuck with whatever the gloss term is in your glossary topic. You can override that as needed. So it's versatile. And exactly where I would put in my glossary master map and all my book maps. So I'm going to stick it in a back matter element, in the book list element, in the glossary. And this is going to depend on your model, but this is how we stick it into all of our book maps. So we get this wonderful custom glossaries for everybody. Checking my notes. Hold on 1 second. Yes, I wanted to mention on glossaries that measurements around glossary views are pretty huge. If you're using glossaries or you want to use glossaries, it's going to increase your reuse percentage quite a bit, especially using this system of pulling the master glossary map each time. Your reuse goes way up, and the maintenance on it is very, very low. So I think it's worth it. It's a lot faster for your authors to then try to maintain inconsistent definitions through definition lists. Even if you're conrefing in a definition list from here and there, it's just easier to maintain terms and definitions of any kind inside glossary topics, because then you can just wheel them in this glossary map, which is really easy. So we're on to the difficult one now. Content that both changes and stays the same. So a few ways you can do this. You're going to probably use profiling, or you maybe have used profiling already. This is the audience attribute, the platform, product, other props, and props. Those are the five that you've got available for profiling content. And if you're an old FrameMaker user like me, you're constantly flipping to calling it conditional content. It's the same thing. Technically speaking, they're called profiling attributes. And you might have novice versus advanced in the audience, or Windows and Linux in the platform, or your products in the products attribute values. And this is where you want a step or paragraph, a note, or whatever, an entire topic to apply just to one type of user or one type of product, and that sort of control over customizing the content for your end users. You can show this content based on the profile of the end user. So they log into where they're accessing the information based on their role. Their role might be associated to their login. You just automatically show them the content that applies to them. or it could be something where they're self-selecting. They say, I'm an advanced user, don't show me anything that's novice. And you get around having to do a login sort of situation. And you control your profiling attributes with your DITA-val file. And probably most of you are basically familiar with the DITA-val file, but it's just a little instruction file that says, show this. I've got an audience equals novice for this book map. That's all it does. What people have not yet started to use very much, I don't think, is the subject scheme map. And this is actually useful for on the authoring side, which is one of the rare pieces of usefulness that seem to pop up. But this lets you determine or set, I should say, values for your authors. So you set the valid values in the subject scheme map. And if you're using an XML editor like Oxygen, automatically give you those options in the pop-up menu for setting profiling attributes. And all you have to do is select, as an author, all you have to do is select them as a checkbox, and it'll apply the right profiling attribute values for you. It also finds if you've typed in or added an attribute value that is not on the list, and it'll give you a little warning that it doesn't meet the subject scheme map definitions for what is a valid value. That's an awfully handy thing. However, and this is my big however, profile attributes are the closest thing to FrameMaker's conditional content, and it's also the clunkiest way of reusing content. I know that we're used to it, and it's something that's a direct sort of linkage from what we did in FrameMaker, but it's static. Once you set this sort of profiling attributes in your content, you can't automatically do anything with them other than show hide. You can't swap content in and out the way that is possible with other mechanisms. So in my opinion, you only resort to this unless you absolutely have to. That is a valid use case. Sometimes your tools do not fully support other mechanisms, and you might use, and I'm going to call it stuck with profiling attributes. But the best practice, which I will go over in a little bit, is actually to move away from profiling attributes and start using keyrefs instead, which I will get to. So attributes, this is what I'm talking about. I've got a prerequisite with a product's value set. So you only see this prerequisite if you've purchased the discount universe. And if you purchase the discount universe, you do in fact need a license to restart the universe. Of course, it's fictional, but it was a lot of fun to write. So same thing with the next one. The step only applies if you're on a Windows platform, that sort of thing. I think you guys are probably used to this. What I'll talk about instead are conkeyrefs. Conkeyrefs are unfortunately too complex to explain in 2 minutes. But I'll do my best to explain high level why you might want to pursue them. So a conkeref is a conref. It is. It uses a key instead of a direct href value. Conref says, I have an href to this other topic. I'm going to pull that specific piece in. A conkeref says, no, I'm going to stick a conref in here, but it's going to be anything with the label vanilla. Okay, so I have managed to sort of release those two topics from each other. They're not dependent on each other anymore. I have something in the middle called the key that is going to do the work for me. So there are a couple of huge benefits to this. Basically, it's going to be a dynamic way of pulling in or showing content. And it allows you to do this indirect pull, which means because it's a key, you're defining it, you're controlling it in your map. It's not inline inside your topics. It's a huge, huge benefit. And this is like using profiling attributes, but it's a lot more elegant, which translates to being a lot easier. So it's a very smart alternative, not just to profiling attributes, but also conrefs themselves. Remember I said keep in the back of your mind when I was talking about conrefs that we're also going to talk about keyrefs? Well, instead of conrefs, the best practice is actually to use keyrefs. So in things that have specific keys and specific files, I get directly the content I need. It's all controlled from my map, and it's just a lot easier. So, quick example. This book needs to be specific to vanilla ice cream. The book is about ice cream, but I want to publish just for vanilla ice cream. My map says, just pull in the vanilla content for me. As long as I've set my keys in line in my task, concepts, and references, it's just going to pull in my vanilla content when I publish. That's it. If I want to swap that out and make it chocolate, no problem. I change my key, or I use a different map, which has a different key defined, and it pulls in all my chocolate content dynamically, without me having to go in and do anything with the devel file, figure out if my profiling attributes are right, fix my conrefs, change all my conrefs, do something crazy like have profiling attributes on conrefs. I don't have to do any of that. All I have to do is usually change the path or the file name in my map, and it will swap in a whole different set of content for me. It is elegant. Let me tell you, if you haven't played around with conrefs, they're a little bit hard to get your mind around. But once you get it, it's much faster, much more elegant way to work. So I have a couple of slides on guidelines for profiling attributes versus conrefs. So go ahead and use your profiling attributes if you're just using one or two attribute values, one or two attributes. You've got audience set to novice and advanced. There's not going to be a huge benefit in moving to conrefs. But if you're using anything more than that, when you want to swap content in and out, like the vanilla chocolate thing I was talking about, you ever use content that doesn't yet exist, you can actually do that. You're going to write it next week, next month, that's fine. You can still refer to it in your content, pull it into your map, and once you have it written in your warehouse topic, it's going to get pulled in automatically. It's all because it doesn't have this hard link between the warehouse topic and your task or your concept or your reference. Files can get moved around. They can get renamed. You don't care so much about the IDs. When you're using conrefs, you must have your IDs the same. If somebody goes in and changes an ID on a conref source, your conref breaks right there. Doesn't happen in conrefs. There's no direct connection between those two pieces of information. It's all handled through the map. If you run into the situation where you have more than can be handled by the profiling attributes that are available to you, so you're starting to use other props and props extensively, then that's a good indicator that you should start using conrefs instead. So you've gone too far down the profiling attributes way, and you need to come back and use a more efficient method for reusing content. You've all seen a DITAvel file that's out of control, or where you have 16 different versions of a DITAvel file. We actually ran into that on a project where the authors had to swap in the right DITAvel file, or else it wouldn't work. And there were 16 different ones that they had to choose from. So it gets a little crazy. And if you've gotten to that point, really seriously consider conrefs instead. They're flexible. They're really easy to maintain because they're maintained in the maps. And they're dynamic. They dynamically pull in the content that you need. The cons, they do take some time to get your head around. You must sort of do a practice set of conrefs for it to make any sense, and maybe attend a webinar or two. Time to set them up, because you need to set them up, but more time than, say, a conref warehouse. Probably a little bit less time. And one of the serious drawbacks is actually, depending on the authoring tool you're using, the authors can't always see the content that's being referenced in a conref. It doesn't always resolve all the way through the map. Oxygen is one that does resolve it all the way through, so you can see your content properly. But something like an older version of XMetal just does not do it. I haven't tested the new version. So when you're testing, before you roll out to your authors, make sure you test it with all your tools and make sure it works all the way through. So con versus conrefs, there's just no debate over it. You're going to try to use conrefs instead of conrefs. It's just a more elegant, more agile way of using a conref. It's the same idea, though, of the warehouse topics, but it's just controlled by the key instead of by the href value. And it's just this indirect address. So it removes that hard link between the topics. You're centralizing the control in the map, and you can swap in and out the content that you need. It's a lot more versatile. So, for example, with a menu items warehouse topic where I was showing you how to conref all the menu items in, if that was conrefs instead, what I could do is have two warehouse topics. I showed all the menu items for product version A, and you have another warehouse topic for product version B. So you don't need to just change, you need to maintain two sets. Well, I can have those in different warehouse topics. I can swap them in and out simply by having a different key definition in my data map. It is really easy, and if your warehouse topics are called warehouse topic 1 and warehouse topic 2, really the only change you need to make is that 1 to a 2, and that will swap out the entire menu set for your content without you having to do anything else. It's once you set it up, it works really well. Okay, let's not forget about reuse on the topic and map level. This is repurposed content across the enterprise. So you can content out to support, marketing, training, and any other departments that will take it. Sometimes this means they need to be working in XML. Sometimes they can sort of leverage it into their own system as well. But that's still valid reuse, and it's reuse you should measure. And valid reuse is also just single sourcing. You're single sourcing by creating a subset of content for mobile. You're not going to change your topics. You're not going to re-author your topics to create a subset of content for mobile output. What you're going to do is reuse that content and automatically strip out the content that sort of the elements that you don't want, or you can use keys to change things up and identify things to change. And conrefs, I don't know how you use conrefs there, but that's still valid reuse, and it's something you should measure. Just a quick note on reusing content across enterprise departments. Do a pull instead of a push, because if you send out the content you think they need to create their own deliverables, you'll be wrong. The content you think they need to use and the content they think they need to use, vastly different. So let your instructional designers, your training guys, your marketing guys have access into the system if you can, and let them choose their own pieces to reuse. And also, if you can, teach them the mechanisms of reuse. And if you can, also get them into DITA, because that will be another whole set of reuse that you can measure. Done here. I know we're quite late, but let's go through some best practices. I've kind of been harping on them as I go, but reuse strategy. You're not going to be successful in your reuse as much as you'd like to be unless you plan it first, and that's your reuse strategy. That's what we reuse. It's where you're going to reuse it from, how you're going to reuse it, what mechanisms, what organization of your warehouse topics you're going to use, what type of reuse. When people are allowed to reuse, because sometimes you're not going to want them to. No, I can't imagine that. When you're supposed to implement your use, maybe might be an issue. And governance. Who can change what? Anybody change a warehouse topic, or are you going to clamp down on that and make sure it's only IAs or lead authors that can change warehouse topics? And if you're using things like conrefs, then you need to clamp down on who's able to change IDs as well. So this might be just an informal policy, or it might be something that you implement through your CCMS to limit the availability of who can change what. So make sure that's all laid out in your reuse strategy. A reuse strategy is one of those things that when you're writing it, it helps you think about what's possible to reuse. It really is key. Another best practice that we've talked about today is warehouse topics. It is the best way of maintaining single source of content. Your authors know where to look for it. They know it's a conref source. It's easy to manage, easy to update, easy to find. And as I mentioned at length, use keyrefs if you can instead of conrefs and instead of profiling attributes. Seriously consider a CCMS. It really helps. And anything with moderate to extensive reuse. If you don't have nutrition requirements, all the rest of it, you might be humming and hawing over whether you need a CCMS. But in opinion, a CCMS really does make extensive reuse possible. It's gnarled in the impossibleness of a shared file system, for example. At some point during your reuse strategy. So if you don't have one already, you should really consider a CCMS. I talked about this briefly, managing keys in their own maps. You have a map specific to keys, and you swap that in and out and modify it, and you can have different versions of it. And that just separates your key definitions from your book map and just makes it sort of portable, like a little suitcase you can carry around and put your keys wherever you need them. Measure your reuse often, so at the beginning, the middle, the end, and push your metrics to the executives, to management, so they can see how you're doing and where you need to improve. It's one of those things that you can actually measure, so you should. Yes, best practices to measure. And that's all, of course, is your content must be well written, and by well written I mean it needs to be minimal. It needs to be topic-based. You must have your concepts references be written properly according to best practices of DITA topic-based writing. Every time you have content that's well written this way, it makes it easier to reuse. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So if you haven't already cleaned up your content, you should do that and then implement your reuse. In summary, I hope you've seen that reuse potential is everywhere. It's in content that changes, content that stays the same, content that both changes and stays the same, which hopefully makes sense to you now. And the fourth one is content that can be leveraged across departments. Hopefully you've seen that glossaries are kind of cool, and you might be considering using one. I'm a big fan, and they can be leveraged in many different ways, especially in the new tools. Things like Fluid Topics and MindTouch can leverage glossaries in a pretty cool way where they're off to the side. They're not sort of these monolithic things that people have to read. Metrics are important. I've harped on that enough. Your reuse strategy is essential to your success. There's no question. If you put effort into maximizing your reuse, especially early on in your DITA conversion project, you're going to see the ROI come way up. And, of course, it adds authority to your content. You've got the single source of truth where you know your content is consistent and well reused. And as promised, the resources slide. There's the Count to Anything tool at the top. Next, the article from Bill Hackos on the calculating the reuse, and you can look at how he came up with his equation. White paper on the glossaries from the OASIS committee. And there's a slide share presentation on keys and conrefs if you're interested in pursuing that. It moves into the conrefs in a big way, so it's really about conrefs. I think that is all for today.
That's great. Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for the great presentation. There's a lot of detail in there, and I hope that everyone found it useful and informative. So now we want to move into a Q&A session. We have a few questions. If I can raise them with you directly, Jackie, and take it from there. Sure. One was raised quite early in the presentation. From what little seen, authoring faster in DITA seems like an oxymoron. Authoring faster. At least the first year or so, how does one end up writing faster in DITA if you have to mess with tags and tables and markup?
You don't have to mess with formatting anymore. So there is a learning curve to starting to author in DITA, and if you have a good teacher, trainer early on, it makes that learning curve a lot easier. You start writing with best practices instead of sort of going down a wrong path, like using profiling attributes. But there's a curve, but in the end, I mean, I can author, 3 times faster in DITA rather than in unstructured FrameMaker, for example.
Yeah, there's an investment up front.
Yeah, definitely an investment up front, definitely. Tools, training, just, getting used to it, but it's well worth it in the end.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question. Have you seen effective reuse of content within non-DITA-based CMSs? CMSs, we should.
That's a good question. Does SharePoint count? Yes. Yes, I have. DocBook does reuse as well, a little bit. I'm not that familiar with it, though. S1000D as well. It's possible, but I'm really focused on the DITA content.
That's fine. Another question. For conkeyrefs, can images be stored in these warehouse topics? For example, product A uses one icon and product B uses another icon. Can I store these in a warehouse topic to swap out via conkeyrefs?
Yes. It's the easy way to conkeyref. You just write out. You do it the same way with the key. You have one image tagged with the key vanilla, one image tagged with the key chocolate, and swap them in and out, and it's really easy.
All right. When should you use glossref instead of topic ref?
Ref is when you're pulling a glossary topic into your glossary map. Pull it into your glossary map, not your regular map. It doesn't belong there. You have to put it into your glossary map and then stick your glossary map into your back map there.
Okay, more. How do you balance use against the long processing time across long distances in a single globally used CMS?
Again?
Yeah. How do you balance reuse against the long processing time, long distances in a single globally used CMS?
You get a better CMS. Have a lag? Is that talking about a lag?
I think so.
Well, you need a better CCMS, or you need better infrastructure for your CCMS. We've got an implementation that's more local to people in Asia, for example. You can share the same database and yet have something closer, so you don't have that lag. That is a question to ask IT first to see if they can improve your architecture, and I mean your database architecture, not your DITA architecture.
Right. Okay. I think we're done with the Q&A. So thanks, Jackie. And I just want to bring everything to a close with two more points if I can. So if we could just perhaps move on. There's nothing like analysing and converting your own content. We think to help you better understand some of the issues involved when migrating to DITA. And so if you want to provide a sample file, maybe 20 or 30 pages, you can upload them via our website. When we'll happily process them through DITA and share the results with you. And you can retain that DITA output for evaluation and testing purposes. So that's just a free offer we do as a matter of course, and hopefully which you might take advantage of. And next, really before bringing everything to a close, is that there's a couple of upcoming webinars we'd like to bring to your attention. So Jackie's with us again in October and November with top conversion mistakes to avoid and project planning for conversion projects, and that will bring this year's series of webinars to a close. We're also actually Stilo is presenting directly at a webinar series which is being run at the moment by DITA, and we'll be talking about converting legacy content to DITA, and particularly we'll be demoing Stilo Migrate and version 3, which is just about to be released in July of this year. Otherwise, I think that's really it. I'd like to thank everyone for their attention today. Thanks for joining us, and thank you once again, Jackie, for a great presentation, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.